If I could have your attention, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you would please find your seats. Have a seat, please. Our program can only begin if you're in your seats. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oops. So I don't think we'll really do anything differently. Okay, good. Awesome. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I would like to have you stand, please, and welcome Her Excellency, Madam President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Wema sibe munye, sibe moya munye, sivuselele ingoma zendulo. Wema sibe munye, thina sibe moya munye, sivuselele ingoma zendulo. Amasiko akwethu ashonaphi, amasiko obekukhona izolo akusenziwa. Amasiko akwethu ashonaphi, wona amasiko obekukhona izolo akusenziwa. Wema sibe munye, thina sibe moya munye, sivuselele ingoma zendulo. Wema sibe munye, thina sibe moya munye, sivuselele ingoma zendulo. Amasiko akwethu ashonaphi, wona amasiko obekukhona izolo akusenziwa. Amasiko akwethu ashonaphi, amasiko obekukhona izolo akusenziwa.
Well, how's that for a way to kick off our evening tonight? In Sing Easy, the music of. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It sounded great. Good evening. My name is Mark Wright, morning anchor at King 5 Television here in Seattle. It's my honor and pleasure to be your MC for the evening tonight. And what a beautiful venue, what a beautiful gathering of people. And we're so glad that you're here. We are here tonight for one reason, really, and that is to support the Center for Infectious Disease Research and its crucial work when it comes to fighting the world's infectious and deadly diseases, underfunded diseases, I might add, including HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, diseases that claim 14 million lives every year. We have a very distinguished lineup of presenters and speakers tonight, including, as we mentioned, Madam President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia. Madam President, it's so great to have you here. Welcome. We also have Vulcan founder and chairman Paul Allen. Mr. Allen, it's wonderful to have you here tonight. Thank you. I should mention that Madam President Johnson Sirleaf is the first female in the history of Africa to be elected head of state. She's the kind of person our children will read about, and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren in the history books years from now. Before we get started, some housekeeping. Wanted to announce the winners of the silent auction, but there are a lot of them, so you will get a text message if you were the successful bidder on the silent auction out front, so look for a text on that. Also, at your table, look for a paddle. At this point, if you can identify your paddle, that would be great. We hope to see a lot of these paddles flying in the room tonight. This is a bit unconventional, though, tonight, but it's going to be exciting. If and when your table collectively raises $5,000 at any point tonight, raise your paddle in the air, and you'll get a free bottle of champagne, courtesy of Chateau Ste. Michelle. It gets better. If you raise another $5,000, you get another bottle of champagne. Some tables may get 20 bottles of champagne, I'm guessing. So that's how it works, and thank you to Chateau Ste. Michelle for that. To start off the program this evening, I would like to introduce Dr. Alan Addaram. Dr. Addaram has been a long and storied face in the global health community, beginning in apartheid, era South Africa. As a young child, he accompanied his mother, who was a doctor, as she treated her disenfranchised patients in the black townships of South Africa. As a teenager, Dr. Addaram joined the anti-apartheid movement. His active role in trade unions and community movements led to him being banned and under house arrest for 5 years. As part of his contribution to improving the fabric of South African society, Dr. Addaram played an important role in guiding President Nelson Mandela's post-apartheid government in its policies on medical research. Since then, he has had a strong influence in shaping the biomedical research environment in South Africa, especially when it comes to emphasizing the importance of basic science as the foundation for improving healthcare. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and Director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research, Dr. Alan Addaram.
Thank you very much, Mark. First, I'd like to begin by welcoming Her Excellency, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. We're absolutely delighted and honored to have you here. Also, I'd like to welcome Mr. Paul Allen, founder of Vulcan and a supporter of global health, and Mr. Allen will be receiving our award for global health this evening. Many of you know that the center is the oldest and biggest private non-profit global health institute in the US, which is focused solely on infectious disease research. Our major focus is to combat the diseases that devastate resource-poor countries, and the key diseases that we focus on are HIV/AIDS, malaria, and TB. Tonight's program is purposed to bring awareness and funds to this important research and also to global health in general. The past year in infectious disease research has been in the media's spotlight. As you know, 2014, we had the Ebola outbreak, and that was a global tragedy. Thankfully, the spread of the Ebola virus was slowed down dramatically, in part due to the heroic efforts of President Johnson Sirleaf. However, this success resulted in the waning of public awareness in general about infectious diseases, and that, I think, is a problem. I'd like to point out that HIV, TB, and malaria are still global tragedies. Sadly, they kill as many people in one day as Ebola did during the entire duration of its most recent epidemic. For example, a third of the entire world is latently infected with TB. And what is terrifying at the moment is that totally drug-resistant TB has emerged in a number of countries. And I think we're going to have our hands full with that very soon. You may know that malaria kills a child in Africa every 43 seconds. Try to imagine the effect of losing a child, just in general. It's unimaginable to me as a father. The effect that that has on the family, on mental health, and on the economy of resource-poor countries is absolutely devastating. In my country, South Africa, HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis are absolutely devastating the fabric of the society. In fact, these diseases are doing what apartheid never managed to do. They're beginning to break the will of the people. So every year that passes with no effective vaccines or cures for these most deadly diseases results in the death of literally millions of people around the world. We at the center are in the business of saving lives. We come to work every day motivated to develop vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics against these diseases that so devastate resource-poor countries. It's a tough job. It's a job that seems absolutely impossible at times. But I'd like to quote the late President of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. It is always impossible until it's done. Please, let's come together tonight and pledge to end this global injustice. Thank you.
My name is Ken Stewart. I'm a scientist and founder of the Center for Infectious Disease Research. I realized early in my career that there are millions of people dying every year of these diseases, and by and large, the pharmaceutical companies or the companies that are developing drugs and diagnostics, et cetera, were not working on these diseases, even though these are the diseases that were killing most of the people in the world.
mathomo gore Dr. Ilefetse o mpotsa gore ke na le HIV le TB a zange go be mnate mo nna ke ile ka utlwa botlhoko thata ke ile ka gatelelwa le go lwala thata.
Dit was my derde keer as ek TB gehad het. Eerste keer ek het TB gehad, 2 keer. Die derde keer toe kry ek HIV.
Ngavimbeleleka because bengithicha i-grade R. So after that ukuthi ngifound ukuthi njani ngaba senokusaba ekutheni ngaqhubeka ngithiche i-grade R because abantu the way bakhuluma ngakhona yabona abantu bane problem for ebantwaneni babo.
Yiwo vele ukuthi ngoba se-HIV umuntu athama ngoba u-HIV ngenzeka ukuthi ndlulele ngasho nje njalo.
Ndichirwala nanchidzona neto natoichirema. Alo sometimes ke lore saka dinwa ke le ditlogela. Sometimes ke lore ke dinwa tla fola bana ba ka ba pele.
It
Because we know that malaria is a tough problem, tuberculosis is a tough problem, HIV is a tough problem. And so we know that we have to develop drugs that will be effective for several years in order to keep the pressure on these diseases that are really devastating the world.
I work at the center because we are solely focused on solving these grand challenges in infectious diseases in global health. And our unique capabilities bringing systems biology to infectious disease research will come up with new interventions that prevent and treat those diseases.
Imagine that you're a scientist and you're trying to sample Lake Union and you're testing drop by drop or teaspoon by teaspoon. But now imagine that something comes along that allows you to test the entire lake in one shot. That's systems biology.
The utilizations of systems biology in our work today, that has been one of the greatest tools that we could have at the moment.
I think with the right support, we'll have a vaccine in the next 5 to 10 years.
They word kan they help per create like the TB and the HIV klaar kom by ons. Gaan baie levies in my heart.
Sinabantwana bami bangabanjwa ngile HIV limphethe mina. Bakhona ukukhula kahle, bakhona ukudimaintain.
Hele teng mo setšhabeng ka botsa gore he ile teng nka tsamaya le mo ba ba lwalang ke kgone ba botsa gore emang ka maoto pele se e teng khopela le ska dula ka bolwetse gore le kgone fola. O tseba ntse ke khopela o re thuse gore bolwetse bo se ke ba tsenelela mo baneng ba rona.
We really have to be the champion of the people who are afflicted by malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV. But we just can't do it without public support.
Our work is definitely focused on the future, and we need the support right now in order to create the solutions that will eliminate so many of these infectious diseases. So I think it's part of any balanced portfolio for a donor is to support both the short-term and the long-term view, and our approach is the long-term.
We do care. We are working and trying to make an impact. We need some help in order to do that, but we are trying to make an impact, and I think that means a lot to people elsewhere in the world. We're standing on the side of hope.
But in the final analysis, it's about the lives. The money is the means to save as many lives as we can save. If we don't do this, I don't know who else is going to do it.
So just a glimpse of some of the work taking place at the center. In the more than 200 years since Edward Jenner's discovery of the vaccine for smallpox, the science behind vaccine development really has not changed very much. As of tonight, there is still no effective and approved vaccine for HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. Thanks to new technology and approaches, though, scientists are finally on the cusp of developing new vaccines for the first time. The Center for Infectious Disease Research is at the forefront of this effort. And here to talk specifically about how the center is leading the charge with its innovative and unique systems biology approach is Dr. John Aitchison, Scientific Director and Professor at the Center for Infectious Disease Research. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mark. And Madam President, welcome to Seattle. Malaria, HIV, and TB. These are complex pathogens that have outmaneuvered scientists for decades. They control and they evade our immune systems, and we have no vaccines against them. That is not to say scientists haven't tried. They have, over and over again. The simple fact is, traditional approaches to making vaccines have not worked. But I believe we are at a point in history that we can conquer these and other recalcitrant infectious diseases. Why? Because medical research is undergoing a renaissance. And the basis of that renaissance is systems biology. The Center for Infectious Disease Research is the only institute in the world dedicated to applying systems biology to infectious disease. For the last 50 to 60 years, biological research has been performed in an incremental fashion. It has taken what is called a reductionist approach. The idea of the reductionist approach is that to understand biology, we have to take it apart, down to the level of the molecules. And that by studying these components in excruciating detail, we'll be able to explain biology, ultimately in terms of chemistry and physics. But this approach falls well short when we want to understand complex biological systems. Let me explain. Imagine there's a scientist in Japan who studies chairs. He knows more about chairs than anyone else in the world. In fact, he studies a particular kind of chair. He studies a steel frame chair. It's got a soft cushion, just like the one you're sitting on tonight. There's another scientist in Germany who studies cutlery, knives and forks. Another in Brazil studies flowers. And someone in Boston has spent her entire life studying that light. And this is great when it comes to wanting to know how long a person will be comfortable on a soft cushioned steel frame chair. We know who to call. But look around the room. There's so much more than just tables and chairs and people. Together, this room has energy. It has emotion, it has purpose, it has drive. And these are the emergent properties of this system. The whole is much greater than the sum of the parts. Everybody and everything is playing a part in this system. So studying the chair or any component part in isolation, while important, cannot tell us anything about how the system works. And how is the most important question. This is the basis of systems biology. It allows us to inventory all the elements in a complex biological system, reveal their interactions, and learn the system's emergent properties. Systems biology can tell us about how biology works. The scientific renaissance I'm talking about is being fueled by the confluence of technology and computation to detect, measure, and understand the elements in complex biology. We are using these technologies and approaches to study infectious diseases, and we're now in a position to begin to understand these complex systems, like the immune system, like a pathogen, or like how a pathogen infects a human, makes him sick, controls his biology so that it can replicate and move on to the next victim. We focus on malaria, HIV, and TB because these are the biggest killers. You'll hear some exciting results from Stefan Kappa of malaria research a little later. But to date, we have no effective vaccines for these diseases because these pathogens take control of our immune system. They hide out in us, and they wait for their opportunity to strike. We must match the complexity of the biology with the complexity of science. Let me give you a few examples of how systems biology approaches are paying off and allowing us to do things we've never been able to do before. As Alan mentioned, about a third of the world is infected with TB. The pathogen lies waiting, and then it activates and causes disease. By the time we know it's become active, patients are spreading the disease by coughing or simply living in close quarters. Scientists at the center have used systems biology to measure the gene activity in blood and predict whether TB will become active, remarkably, before symptoms emerge. This will enable early treatment, reduce the risk of transmission, and may reduce the risk of the emergence of drug resistance. We can also use these approaches to identify better drugs, drug targets, and predict their efficacy. This will lead to better drugs and counter drug resistance. Systems biology is also being used to evaluate potential vaccines by monitoring complex responses of our immune systems. This information can guide us to determine exactly what it is we need to put in a vaccine to prevent disease. This will lead to better vaccines, better clinical trials, and a much deeper understanding of how the human body responds to infection, potentially impacting all infectious diseases and all diseases of inflammation. To paraphrase the old saying, you need to win the battle, you need to understand the enemy. Systems biology approaches are already generating these fundamental insights that are allowing us to understand the enemy, leading to new diagnostics, new drugs, monitoring immunity, and guiding the development of effective vaccines. We will win this battle, and we will save lives. At the end of the day, we're a community of innovators. We always have been, from those who founded Boeing to the many people in this room, from Vulcan to Amazon. In Washington State, we are at the cutting edge, and people around the world look to us as leaders to make discoveries and innovations to improve the quality of life for people all around the globe. They look to us as innovators in medical research and biosciences, and we are discovering new and amazing things every day. These are exciting times. This is indeed a medical renaissance, and we're all playing a part. Thank you for your attention and support.
John, thank you. Before we move on to the next section of our program, I'd like to take a moment to recognize some very special guests we have with us here tonight. We're very privileged to be joined this evening by members of the Liberian Association of Washington State. They are here, of course, to show support for the president of their home country. Will the members of the Liberian Association please stand so we can recognize you? It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. So if any of you in the audience have a chance afterward to say hello, to stop by to say hello, you can really hear some incredible stories about their experience in Liberia and what it's like to live firsthand with some of these infectious diseases. Again, thank you so much for your attendance tonight. As a nonprofit organization, all of the money raised this evening goes directly to the center's efforts to create universally sustainable vaccines and treatments for infectious diseases. This week I was listening to a radio interview the president gave a few years ago. When she took over, just to give a money perspective on this, when she was elected president in 2006, the entire budget for the country of Liberia was $18 million, somewhat south of that. Tonight we hope to raise $1 million. That puts into perspective what we're up against, and I think it also highlights how uniquely positioned we are as Americans to give in this way. So the ultimate goal is to create that world where we don't have to lose 14 million people a year to these diseases. The Board of Trustees, of course, is paramount to accomplishing this goal. They do a lot of heavy lifting. The overall success of the organization is on their shoulders, so please join me in welcoming the chairman of the Board of Trustees, Mark Ashida, who coincidentally spent 1976, the summer in Liberia. Think about that for a minute, how all the dots are being connected. Come on up.
Thank you, Mark. Every year, millions of people die from infectious disease. Sadly, the effects of infectious disease go far beyond these deaths. Malaria accounts for half of all preventable absenteeism in African schools. There are 18 million orphans as a result of HIV/AIDS. Malaria alone costs Africa $12 billion in lost GDP revenue every year. These are unconscionable tragedies. To give context to the devastating impact of infectious disease, and specifically Ebola, we are joined tonight by an incredible woman. President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia has been a trailblazer and a pioneer her entire life In 2006, she took office as the first elected female head of state in Africa. In 2007, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her courage and her unwavering commitment to expanding freedom and improving the lives of African people. In 2011, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her extraordinary work in promoting peace, democracy, and gender equality. In 2014, Forbes declared her one of the most powerful women in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Her Excellency, Madam President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Adoram, President and other officers and staff for the Center for Infectious Disease Research. Mr. Paul Allen, Chairman, founder of Follican. Mr. Mark Wright, MC, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored by your invitation to share this evening the experience of our country as we faced and successfully battled against what is perhaps the world's most horrifying affliction. I'm accompanied by our Deputy Minister for Health, Mr. Toba Nyinswa, who headed the incident management system that coordinated and managed our fight. And I'm so glad that so many of our compatriots who either experience this tragedy or contributed to some relative, some associate, some friend who did so and was able to respond to them. We look forward during this short visit to meeting and exchanging views with the many of you who represent internationally known pioneering and innovative scientific institutions. This year, Liberia celebrates 12 consecutive years of peace. This is a long way from the turbulent years of the recent past, which resulted in a collapsed economy, destroyed infrastructure, large external and domestic debt overhang, large external problems, thousands of exiled citizens, and what one might say was an environment of despair. There were many and continuing challenges. National capacity was low, reflecting human capital flight and years of little or no schooling for the large number of unemployed youths. A bloated civil service took a large percentage of national revenues, crowding out allocation to capital expenditure for infrastructure development. Efforts to control corruption battle a systemic value system developed over many years of deprivation. In the past decade, following a democratic elections in 2005 and the start of government in 2006, which I am proud to lead, significant progress has been made. Direct foreign investment has been mobilized, traditional production activities recommenced, international and diplomatic relations restored, external debt canceled through the HIPC process, petroleum exploration commenced, new laws and strategies formulated, and a certain level of infrastructure and basic services restored. We commenced the second term of the administration with enthusiasm over the progress to date. Growth responded to the economic stimulation and climbed to as high as 9.7% in 2012, bringing hope for the realization of our 2030 vision to become a middle-income country. A 5-year program, Agenda for Transformation, called for continued priority in health, education, infrastructure, and agriculture, all underpinned by security to ensure peace consolidation. In 1990, Liberia had an under 5 mortality rate of 248 to 1,000 live births. Just imagine what this would mean if 25% of your children were dying before they reach their 5th birthday. By 2013, we reduced this to 71 per 1,000 live births, thereby achieving the Millennium Development Goal number 4. Similarly, the incidence of malaria infection was reduced from 66% in 2005 to 28% in 2011. Life expectancy increased by 20 years. Liberia seemed poised for achieving all the socioeconomic goals in an environment of an open society where citizens enjoyed freedoms of speech, religion, and association. The first shock was experienced in 2013. Growth decline to 5.9% brought about by the decline in global prices of our key primary commodities, iron ore and rubber. This required reduction in budget and planned activities, which stalled operations for investment. We remain hopeful in formulating measures designed for economic diversification to soften the effect of the shock. In March of 2014, I was advised by citizens in one of our rural areas close to the border with Guinea a neighboring country were falling sick and dying from a strange disease. With help of the group Médecins Sans Frontières, the situation seemed to be under control. A few months later, there were outbreaks in several areas of the country, creating panic and causing citizens to flee. By early August, the disease spread rapidly through several parts of the country and then reached the capital city, where 1/3 of the population reside, largely in overcrowded, poor communities. We were confused. We were frightened. We did not know what to do to confront this unknown enemy, an enemy we could not see, an enemy we could not hide from, an enemy we did not understand. People ran to nowhere. People cried. People prayed. They fell sick and they died. Families and communities were torn apart. The disease struck down the best in our society. Doctors, teachers, mothers, religious leaders, those upon whom our communities depend. It robbed us of our culture, of our ability to care for others, which defines our own humanity. Our health systems collapsed when doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers without proper protective gear died treating the sick, many times on the belief that the symptoms reflected diseases such as malaria and yellow fever, which were known to us. Others died of diseases other than Ebola for lack of access to health facilities, for lack of doctors and medical personnel who refused to work for the risk of dying like some of their colleagues. Airlines stopped or sharply reduced services. Borders closed. Trade and travel routes were suspended. Schools closed. Public gatherings were restricted. Farms and markets ceased activities. Contractors, consultants, and investors left the country. Commercial activities plummeted. Our fiscal balances weakened as revenues fell and expenditure increased, largely on health operations. Our initial reaction in meeting this crisis centered on the restriction of movements around the country or in communities and forced by security forces. This led to the death of one and injury of another of our young citizens. It was clear that a new strategy was required that would enhance the confidence of our citizens in our government's ability to manage the situation and protect their lives. We resolved that the community themselves had to become active participants in battling this disease. Our incident management team went into action by empowering citizens and leaders of the communities to take charge, to take responsibility as first responders in doing contact tracing and administering primary medical care delivery, in providing exchange of information. The response from the new strategy was overwhelming as we began to see the result. The incident management team, through information and data received from the communities, could now plan effectively to monitor and deliver timely medical services to those affected. The woes of this affliction continue to intensify. Our citizens, already constrained in travel by reduction in airline flights, face stigmatization on arrival in foreign countries. Liberians were moved to isolated areas and subjected to rigorous medical procedures. You may recall the situation in Dallas, which invoked exceptional fear and panic when a Liberian believed to have the disease came to the United States to visit his family. The world marveled at the significant resources needed to confront this fear in a country that possesses the highest quality of medical services in the world. This is the story of this terrifying disease that no country seems to understand. This is the challenge to you in this community, this scientific community, this pioneering, innovative community, to help us all, to help the world to understand this disease and all the other infectious diseases that inflict people all over the world. As we continue to battle the disease, people died and remained unburied in the communities and the streets due to the high risk of transmission from the disease. In response, we made the most difficult decision by ordering the cremation of the dead victims of the disease. This was a long way away from our standing cultural practice of honoring the dead by touching and preparing them for burial. Our decision brought strong resistance from citizens, many of them who realized that they would never again see their loved ones who had been taken away. All they asked was the opportunity to give them a befitting burial and the right to visit their grave sites. It was painful that we could not respond to their plea. We therefore mobilized religious and cultural leaders to support our decision, which happened to be the right one, to save thousands of lives. As we know, it is normal in a global disaster that the world flocks with great emotion and urgency to respond to the plight of those affected. People from all over the world are likely to be the first on the ground to offer care and to provide direct assistance. This was the case in the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, the 2011 tsunami in Japan, and the 2013 typhoon in the Philippines. Unfortunately, this did not happen in the case of Liberia and the other two affected neighboring countries. We cried for external assistance as our people continued to die. Our hope was dashed as the rapidity of intervention which we anticipated did not take place. Faced with what we considered neglect and uncertainty, I sent a letter to the world, entreating citizens of the world not to let innocent people die, pointing out that this was not a Liberian or a West African tragedy, but increasingly a global threat. I reached out to your president and to your Congress. I also reached out to key leaders and partners all over the world. The passion that characterized our letter to the world resonated deeply as world leaders led by the United States came to our aid. President Obama, followed by other world leaders, including United Nations Secretary General, added their voices to our plea. In the midst of all of this, on September 22nd, the U.S. Center for Disease Control announced a terrifying prediction that 1.4 million people a month would die in the span of 4 months in the 3 neighboring affected countries. Others predicted that 20,000 persons would die before the end of January. I strongly challenged the prediction and called on our citizens to help me to prove them wrong. Already, over 10,400 people had died, including 178 medical practitioners, leaving behind some 3,000 orphans and 1,548 survivors who may still be carrying the virus. On the domestic front, We organized volunteers to take the calls from panicking citizens for relay to medical teams. I intensified the effort of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Ebola, which I chaired, drawing on the experience and resources of partner representatives who joined us as members of the PACE Committee. I visited clinics and hospitals in several areas of the country to bring supplies and confidence and hope to our people. The incident management team took on mass public education sensitization and communication strategies across the country, utilizing door-to-door campaign by community workers to assure the safety and survival of their compatriots. As we galvanize further international support and goodwill, medical specialists and volunteers arrived from our major international partners and our African Union members. They constructed Ebola treatment units and brought in huge amounts of medical equipment and supplies. The United States dispatched a military contingent to construct and fully equip an ETU to cater to the needs of healthcare professionals and workers. The facilities were managed by U.S. health professionals. Our nation rejoiced when the military group arrived, the first time the country experienced U.S. boots on the ground. This represented United States support to Liberia and a vote of confidence in the future of our country. There was a resurgence of hope in our ability as a country working with partners to contain the disease. A welcomed innovation came from the private sector, particularly those with operations in our country, which organized the Ebola Private Sector Mobilization Group, who joined the national effort to fight the disease. More importantly, we grew fully confident of our ability to respond and contain any possible outbreak in the future. This was demonstrated when we experienced a resurgence in July. Although 2 persons died, we were able to contain the virus by immediate quarantining, treatment, and managing those who had come in contact with the persons affected. They were all released within the 21-day period without any sign of the virus. Liberia and the world rejoiced when on September 3rd, Liberia reached the second 42-day countdown period and was declared Ebola-free. One week ago, the United States lifted all travel restrictions and sanctions placed on the country because of the virus. Today, we are fully back to the business of rebuilding our economy and activating all activities that were suspended. The impact of Ebola on our economies has been profound. Declines in growth, public revenues, private consumption, investment, employment, agriculture, production, and productivity. The most important long-term response to Ebola therefore rests in plans and strategies for economic recovery. The process has started as we return to implementation of the priorities of our agenda for transformation. health, education, infrastructure, agriculture. In health, as a #1 priority, we will be working with partners to expand the existing small emergency operations center to a center for disease control, thereby enabling us to continue research on the disease and strengthening our response capacity. This will also require an updating of the healthcare system, including an early warning system that integrates the public and private sector. A revision of our 10-year health plan is already underway, with a heavy focus on training to rebuild and strengthen capacity that was lost when many of our frontline healthcare workers died during the epidemic. We have asked partnership countries who are with us in this fight to join us in a rapid pace as we move from treatment to prevention. This should take into account that Liberia has only 218 medical doctors, 5,234 nurses to serve a population of 4.5 million at 405 public and 253 private health facilities. We know that our desire for quality health care throughout the country cannot be achieved overnight. But we are determined to continue along this path, filling the gap and gradually transitioning to a Liberian-built and led national health care delivery system has the capacity to withstand the size and scope of any possible another Ebola-like outbreak, and to respond effectively and timely to other infectious diseases such as malaria, cholera, typhoid fever, which are prevalent inflictions in Liberia. We want to thank President Obama for sending Tom Frieden, Director of the Center for Disease Control, to Liberia at an early stage. This decision was perhaps the single most influential event that awakened the world to the scope and magnitude of the disease virulent spread in West Africa. We express thanks to the USAID DART team for their assistance in setting up an integrated command, and to the many U.S. implementing partners, the first responders who reached beyond their fears and ran toward the danger and not away from it. We give thanks to the U.S. Embassy in Liberia and Ambassador Deborah Malik for their steadfast support and continued compassion. Working and walking with us every day when the journey seemed impossible. We thank you, Mr. Paul Allen, for your significant and timely support that provided the means to fight the virus. We applaud you. As you are honored tonight with a lifelong dedication to science for the role you played in addressing the global health crisis in Liberia and the other affected countries, and for your tireless commitment to solving global health inequities. We thank the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, which has contributed through the Global Fund to the success we have had in reducing the incidence of malaria. We extend appreciation to Dr. Sirleaf, who is in this audience, and to the doctors and health professionals of the Heart Foundation for the volunteer medical services which they have rendered to the country over the past 8 years. We endorse the program of Partners in Health sponsored by the World Bank and headed by Dr. Paul Farmer, who is organizing the training of thousands of healthcare workers at the community level in several of Liberia's regions. Ebola heightened the interconnected nature of this world in a way that few diseases could, given its ability to move across borders in any country in the world. This is why securing our borders remain a priority, requiring additional resources as well as providing assistance to our neighbors who continue to battle this disease. We also know that full eradication will not be achieved until the whole region is free from Ebola. The Ebola scourge leaves indelible marks of grief, sorrow, and unimaginable affliction. But it celebrates warming tales of extraordinary courage and leadership across governments and communities, as well as exceptional regional and international cooperation. This is the story of tragedy and success. This is the story of community participation, effective partnership, and leadership. Thank you for being a part of this journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very, very inspiring talk. We very much appreciate it. As a sign of appreciation, I'd like to present to you an honorary professorship at the Institute at the Center for Infectious Disease Research. Thank you.
Only one word comes to mind, and that's wow. What an amazing speech, Madam President. Thank you. So next we have a moderated question and answer session with Madam President Sirleaf and a panel of local global health experts. Lisa Cohen, Executive Director of the Washington Global Health Alliance, will moderate the Q&A session. So our panel of experts will be comprised of Dr. Trevor Mundell, President of the Global Health Division at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Also Dr. Alan Aderam, President of the Center for Infectious Disease Research, and also Madam President will also be on the panel. So if members of the audience would like to take part, yes, come up on the stage, please. If members of the audience would like to take part in the Q&A, please tweet your questions with the hashtag AskSirleaf. and your questions. You know you've arrived when you have your own hashtag. So right now I will turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Mark. Madam President, I think we are all overcome by your talk and I know that we can't imagine what you've been through and what your partners have been through. And we hear this through the news media, and it must seem a little strange to see the reaction in Dallas and what happened here in the United States. What were you thinking as you were hearing about that?
Well, you know, we saw the reaction on a television screen, and helicopters, police cars, people running, and really we were a little bit baffled because we say, you know, we know, given our healthcare system and its poor quality, that we were not surprised our people ran, but we felt that this was the United States. We had the capacity, and that this should not happen. But what it does say is the fear of this disease, you know, and we could understand that as much as we, particularly when young Liberians born in this country who'd never been to Liberia were put out of school. I mean, it was fear at a level totally non-understandable. But like I say, we try to understand. The fear was real.
And as we talk this evening about maybe the connection between what the Center for Infectious Disease Research is working on, could you expand a little bit about the impact for women and children, for immunizations, for malaria? I mean, all these things were sort of pushed to the side, measles, those sorts of things. Can you talk a little bit about the unseen, unheard impacts?
Yes, for one of the things is that because the symptoms of the disease that are common to us, you know, measles, typhoid, cholera, it now induces fear. Even now, after we declared Ebola free, that someone sees the symptoms of someone with a high fever, you know, or some other symptoms like that, that there's always that reluctance, that drawback, you know, of wanting to treat them. We've tried to overcome that by creating triage units in as many of our health facilities as possible, so that those who go in can get a rapid test, you know, and can be sent off to special units, you know, for further observation and sputter tests if there's a symptom before they access regular healthcare facilities. But it's always, you know, it's for us, it's a continuing learning experience, because we don't know, you know, what next would happen. We're free, we have a response capacity to be able to address and contain any outbreak, but at the same time, and the vaccination, where we had made much progress, you know, immunizing people for polio and whatnot, obviously, with the disease, the level of access, the level of voluntary compliance, you know, to that dropped considerably. Today, we have not done a survey to see whether the progress we made in reducing the incidence of malaria, you know, and child and maternal mortality, whether we have suffered a great loss in that regard. Those surveys are now being planned, and we can only hope that the reduction was not grave, thereby compounding the work that we have to do to recover.
Trevor, a few weeks ago, you announced the launch of Grand Challenges Africa. and specifically the Alliance for Accelerating Excellence in Science. So tell us why and how that supports what Madam President is talking about.
Well, Lisa, the Grand Challenges Africa is an effort to put significant funds for technology development and for capacity building really in African hands. We have Grand Challenges in many forms, but this is really an initiative whereby scientists in Africa will choose the next generation of scientists and encourage the kinds of developments, the kinds of tools we need to finally make the big impacts that we all desire.
And Alan, as a native South African, can you talk about the importance of this effort?
Well, yes. One of the problems that we suffer, I guess, and Trevor, you may know as well, is a native South African, so we are aligned, I guess, on this, is what we call safari science. What that means is that people from outside come into Africa. They will be very helpful at that time, as was pointed out by Madam President. But unfortunately, it does not build capacity in the African countries or in the resource-poor countries. What is absolutely critical is that those countries develop the infrastructures, develop the capacity, and are able to take care of the problem themselves. They are better suited to do that since they know the local environment. They are better suited to do that because it's a problem that confronts them themselves. And I think that the project that was launched by Trevor and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is perfectly situated, and it essentially involves that particular philosophy.
And it's a partnership, right? I mean, it's not one or the other. It's not international scientists and African. It's going to take all of us, right, Trevor?
No, that's absolutely right. And we have many partners in Africa, African Academy of Sciences, the Wellcome Trust, who are taking part in this effort.
Madam President, a few days ago, following the United Nations General Assembly, the editorial board of the New York Times called for the world to continue to tackle malaria. And in Liberia, you've made tremendous strides. You cut the prevalence in half from 2005 to 2009 and cut it even further since then. But literally every single person in your country is at risk of malaria. And so could you describe for the folks here, what does malaria do? What is it like on a personal level and on a community level? Because I think we hear malaria, but we don't know what the impact is.
Those affected get very sick. They're not able to carry on their normal activities. And there's a certain strain of malaria that is very vicious. We have had people die from it. And when it comes to young children who gets bedbound for days, it means that they're unable to eat and have proper nutrition. They're unable to move around, and you know and the thing is, you can catch it over and over again because our climate conditions, the fact that we have wetlands, which means there are a lot of swamps, which are breeding places for mosquitoes. Really makes it a very dangerous disease, and so and we don't have the means for people to have prophylactics to repair. So it's all treatment that you may have to, if you face a disease over and over again, you have to keep going. That's why we're so thankful that if that's possible, that they'll be looking at some vaccine for malaria. In the meanwhile, we have done the next best thing. We have the nets the treated nets that we try to distribute to citizens. But it's also a cultural thing for them to get accustomed to the nets, because sometimes they use it to go fishing.
It's true, or yes, it's you have to do what you need to do, right? If you need some food for your family, then that's what you're going to do. And also, people can't go to work, right? I mean, it impacts the whole economy. So the children are sick, and we might think about getting the flu once or twice a year, and that really sets us back. But malaria, it can come over and over and over again. And so for those of us who are traveling, we can take some drugs or something to keep us clear from malaria, but that's not available to the population. So Trevor, the Gates Foundation has called for malaria to be eradicated within a generation, which is pretty audacious. How are you going to do it?
Right, Lisa. So Bill Gates and Ray Chambers, the UN Special Envoy for Malaria, made this commitment again at the recent UN meetings earlier this week. Eradicate malaria within a generation. But I think that may not be the most important narrative over here. So, Madam President, you were the past chair of a group of 50 African leaders who made a commitment to the elimination of malaria from sub-Saharan Africa. We have commitments from leaders in Asia to eliminate malaria by 2030, and we have the commitment from the leaders of Haiti and the Dominican Republic to do the same. So this is not an eradication, elimination program that's originated at the United Nations or in Seattle. This is really a grassroots effort. But I have to say that between that aspiration and actually achieving it is a lot of work. I think we, at this point in time, can say we don't see our way to the tools that we need to do this within the next generation. And that's why we have the scientists at the Center for Infectious Disease and Research, who are a very key group in terms of developing those tools and helping us understand the biology of this disease so that, in fact, we can turn aspiration into reality.
So that's a perfect, go right ahead.
Well, let me bring to you your own dear President Nelson Mandela, who said, "It is always impossible until it happens."
That's wonderful.
So I have a final question, but I did want to have everyone pause for a moment and realize how fortunate we are here in Seattle, and to have the inspirational leadership of Mr. Allen, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and others, but also the committed scientists. And Allen, I wonder if you could just give me a brief, this isn't my final question, but I wanted to ask you quickly, because this takes a long time. It takes so long. So how are you continuing to hope? I mean, this has been your whole career, Trevor's whole career. Madam President has been working on this forever.
Well, I guess I'm a determined optimist. I was extremely fortunate to be involved in the anti-apartheid struggle, which was supposed to be impossible, and we won. And it showed me that nothing is impossible. And so it is with this particular disease. I think, particularly at the center, we come to work every day. We believe, as we did then in the apartheid days, that this thing is going to get beaten. And I firmly believe that we'll get the job done.
So now I think that was my final question, because I think it's a perfect way to end. I want to thank you all for your commitment, and thank you all for being here tonight to spend your Saturday evening to hear about this. And thank you all for your work.
Thank you, Lisa. So I want to springboard off something that was just said, and that is to recognize the scientists from the center in this room working on this critical research. Will the professors from the center please stand right now so we can give you a round of applause? So it's not going to be solved tonight, but as Madam President said, if we take steps, there will one day be a cure for all of these diseases, and you're part of the solution tonight. We'll get there. So all of this started 40 years ago. The center has really been on the pioneering edge of global health research. 40 years, the vision of one man. In 1976, Dr. Ken Stewart sought to create an institute that brought together the greatest minds to tackle the world's greatest global health problems. Today, the center has achieved a great deal. 4 decades later, the Center for Infectious Disease Research is the largest independent nonprofit in the U.S. solely focused on infectious disease research. And we can say without certainty, it has made a difference, and it wouldn't have happened without the vision of this man. Please welcome Dr. Ken Stewart, the founder of the Center for Infectious Disease Research.
Thank you all, and thank you all for being here. We may be the largest center, but the problem is huge, and there needs to be more engaged in the battle. As Dr. Zanzak noted in the video, an investment in the Center for Infectious Disease Research is a long-term commitment to improve global health and to saving lives. In addition to government and other grants that fund our scientific research, we need support from the public and the community at large. Causes like ours cannot be accomplished without the support of our community, as represented by those of you who are here in this room tonight. I have the privilege this evening to recognize such a member of our community who is well known for his many contributions to our region and elsewhere. He co-founded one of the largest technology companies in the world, and I would say that was a world-changing event. He was the visionary behind the redevelopment and revitalization of the South Lake Union neighborhood in Seattle, which is now the center's home. He is the owner of the Super Bowl 48 and defending NFC champion Seattle Seahawks. I didn't write pause here because I understood there might be some applause. He is one of the most prominent and generous philanthropists in the world. It is entirely fitting, given the focus of tonight's conversation and the president of Inspiring President Sirleaf, that we highlight his $100 million contribution last year to confront the Ebola crisis. However, his support of global health research goes much further. One example is that in 2000, he gave $5 million to our center to establish our tuberculosis research program. This center is honored to have Paul Allen as a partner in our efforts to improve health globally. He constantly challenges conventional thought with his numerous philanthropic and scientific projects through the Paul G. Allen Foundation and the Allen Institute for Brain Science. We can think of no better person to recognize for pushing important boundaries forward. So I'd like to bring up a special guest tonight to present this award. This is a guest that Paul brought to Seattle. For all Seahawks fans, you know him. Number 73, Michael Bennett.
defensive end for the Seattle Seahawks. So Paul, would you come up and receive the award? Thank you, man.
Feels like the Super Bowl trophy.
Thank you for this very special honor. And thank all of you for your vital efforts to save lives around the world. President Sirleaf, I also want to thank you for your extraordinary leadership. Few presidents have been so tested, and fewer have persevered with your grace, strength, and wisdom. It was somewhat over a year ago that I and many others became deeply alarmed that the Ebola outbreak in West Africa was approaching a catastrophic tipping point. I felt compelled to make a serious commitment to help stop it. Of course, I was not alone, and thanks to the courage and determination of thousands of people in the global and West African health communities, the leadership of President Sirleaf and other elected officials, and the ongoing work of organizations such as the Center for Infectious Disease Research, we have made meaningful progress in the fight against Ebola. And while the threat is not yet over, Africa and the world are safer for this spirit of collaboration and partnership. Even with the progress to date, though, we must remember the lessons that history teaches us about this disease, that we must not let our guard down. We do not even know when we will finally extinguish this current epidemic. It's likely that we'll confront another outbreak within a few years. While we cannot directly control the inception of these outbreaks, we can address factors that will often cause diseases such as Ebola to escalate into epidemics in the first place. Gaps in research about how diseases originate and propagate, inadequate surveillance tools and networks, and a lack of vaccines, diagnostics, and effective treatments. To ensure that the next outbreak doesn't become the next epidemic, we must be proactive in applying the lessons we've learned. We must lead, not just react, because in the end, it's up to us to break this cycle and respond quickly. Inevitably, this will be a challenge, but it's a challenge that will yield to our sustained collaboration, innovation, and determination, like you've heard from many of the people here tonight, and especially the scientists. I would like to say that I'm a big fan of the systems biologic approach that was talked about in industrial scale science. It's necessary to bear down and solve these extremely tough problems, and we're doing some work on the brain that takes a somewhat equivalent approach. And you have to realize these are scientific campaigns that you wage that take many, many years to achieve success and substantial resources. So my hat is really off to everybody that dedicates their lives to this research and tries to push it over the goal line, because we all know the goal is eradicating these diseases, as so many of the speakers have talked about tonight. So together we will defeat Ebola and these other diseases, but the sooner that we bear down and commit ourselves and dedicate the resources, the sooner it will happen. Thank you again for this honor and for your continuing pursuit of a healthier world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, and thanks for all that you do. So right now we're going to have a short intermission. This is going to be some fun. Feel free to chat at your table. Dinner is going to be served, and just enjoy for the next little bit. And then our program will continue in just a bit.
Panyaza. All of Panyaza is the one.
As a child, and the same.
I will, of course, a child. What does it is?
This is not a aiming on my business. But
Khuthuza mfana udlule bengakuzwa bayosala bebambe imlomo khona bezombona uJesu wena khuthuza mama udlule bengakuzwa bayosala bebambe imlomo khona bezombona uJesu wena khuthuza nje udlule bengakuzwa bayosala bebambe imlomo khona bezombona uJesu samba no Jesu shwele baba samba lo Jesu indlela yonke samba lo Jesu samba naye samba lo Jesu yedwa izulwini baba samba lo Jesu samba naye samba lo Jesu indlela yonke baba samba lo Jesu samba naye samba lo Jesu yedwa ikhalile Nkosi samba lo Jesu samba naye samba lo Jesu indlela yonke baba samba lo Jesu samba naye samba lo Jesu yedwa akikufana naye akikufana naye akikufana naye Nkosi yama Nkosi akikufana naye akikufana naye akikufana naye Nkosi yama Nkosi sisi sijabule kuwena sisi sijabule kuwena siyathokoza sijabule kuwena Nkosi yama Nkosi akikufana naye akikufana naye akikufana naye Nkosi yama Nkosi.
So, great job, you guys. Great job. Thank you. How about one more round of applause for InSing Easy? Thank you so much. Sounds incredible. At this time, I'd like to invite you to kind of get back to your seats, if you would. We're going to continue with our program. And obviously, feel free to continue dinner as we continue our portion of the program here. Okay. If I could have your attention, we're going to continue now. So, when you think about malaria and the fact that 500,000 children die from malaria every year, it's hard to put your head around that figure. I think about my kids and I think about what I would feel like, what I would go through if that happened to one of them. It's insurmountable to think that 500,000 children around the world die every year from malaria. It's one of the biggest killers. It's why the center is working to find a cure. There is hope tonight. It's one of the reasons we're here. We are actually on the cusp of an effective vaccine for malaria, and the center's very own Dr. Stefan Kappa has been working on a novel vaccine for this deadly disease. And to find out more about this, and his exciting news about the future of his malaria vaccine candidate. Please welcome the Director of Translational Science and a professor at the Center, Dr. Stefan Kappa.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. It's a wonderful event, and I'm glad that you all got food finally. I hope that will not prevent you from listening a little bit to what I have to tell you tonight. Malaria has always been one of the most devastating and persistent infectious disease threats to humanity. It is caused by infection with a parasitic organism that is spread to humans by the bite of a mosquito. Today, 1.2 billion people are at very high risk of contracting malaria worldwide. And last year alone, 200 million people became sick with malaria, and more than 500,000 died of malaria. And tragically, mostly children under the age of 5. And this is despite continued major strides in the control of malaria by the use of insecticide-treated bed nets, insecticide spraying, scale-up of malarial diagnostic tools, and anti-malarial drug treatments at a total cost of $2.7 billion annually. We believe at the center that the ultimate tool to rid the world of malaria will be a highly protective vaccine. But no highly protective vaccine for malaria exists. Why? It's simple. The malaria parasite is tremendously complex, and it has foiled all vaccine development efforts by outsmarting us scientists. To beat the parasite, we at the center have focused on a simple concept. We use the parasite's complexity to turn it into its weakness. And the movie that you will see in a moment will show you how we do this. Well, here you see a mosquito coming and sitting down on a person, biting and inoculating the malaria parasite into the bloodstream. These parasites make a beeline to the liver very rapidly. That's where they want to go, to your liver. And here, they take no time to infect your liver cells, actively penetrating those cells. Within those cells, the parasite starts to grow and grow and grow and make more and more new forms of the parasite. Tens of thousands of parasites that burst out of the liver and move to your bloodstream. Each of these parasites will infect the red blood cell and again multiply, multiply and multiply, reaching billions of parasites in your bloodstream. And this is what makes you sick. This is what sends you to the hospital. And this is what kills young children. So how do we prevent malaria from causing disease and death? We use systems biology to identify genes in the parasite that are critical for infection of the liver. We then use genetic engineering to remove those genes from the parasite chromosomes, ultimately completely eliminating those genes from the parasite, creating a weakened parasite that is what we call attenuated and is a critical ingredient in a future vaccine. Now, when we use this weakened parasite and inoculate a person, the parasite is alive and it will make again the beeline to the liver and it will infect you. It will infect the liver. But then there's a big difference. This vaccine parasite will not be able to multiply and make you sick, but it will die in the liver. And while dying, it will stimulate your immune system to produce protective antibodies and immune cells that then will wait for the real parasite to come in. So here's the real parasite coming in again, trying to infect a person. But that person now has antibodies and immune cells that recognize the parasite and eliminate it. And even the parasites that can infect cells are eliminated by very potent immune cells. And that means that you will not suffer from malaria and you will live a healthy life. Our vaccine candidate at the center has just recently undergone successful phase 1 safety trials at our clinical trials center. And we are now looking forward to conduct the next clinical trial here in Seattle with our partners at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, the Group Health Organization, and the University of Washington. And tonight, I would like to ask you for your support to help us to accelerate the development of our critical discoveries at the center to develop new diagnostics and vaccines and drugs to combat these terrible infectious diseases. We have great hope that our vaccine will help change the world, where no one has to live under the constant threat of malaria. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kappa. You know, we often think of these diseases as affecting people far away, but tonight you're going to meet a family who has been personally touched by these global infectious diseases. This is the story of one couple's life work. Julie and Rich Hen have adopted 29 children from Ethiopia. Can you imagine that? Yeah, that's worth a round of applause. It is their passion. Some of their children have been affected by HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. One story you may be familiar with is the story of Samira Hen. When she was young in Ethiopia, she had a very severe type of tuberculosis. Her mother, Julie, was told if she didn't bring her to the United States, she would die. So in 2006, Julie adopted Samira and brought her to be treated by Seattle Children's Hospital doctor and Center for Infectious Disease Research Associate Professor Dr. Kevin Erdahl. So we're very pleased tonight to have the Hen family here with us, including Julie, Rich, and Samira. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Well, first of all, I have to share with you that my last name is Hain, and I always tell everyone it rhymes with rain. But because of the way it's spelled, I'm always Julie Hen everywhere I go. I'm very pleased to be here this evening with you to talk about such an important topic, the need for focusing our efforts to eradicate some very devastating diseases. In 1993, my late husband Dennis and I started our journey of adopting children in need of homes from Ethiopia. In fact, we adopted the first sibling group to ever be adopted by an American agency in Ethiopia. Tominich was 6 years old, Amanel was 9 years old, and Azrat was 11 years old. Later, as a single mom, I met Rich Hain, and we got married. I had 11 children when we got married. And we continued to adopt children in need, and many were siblings from Ethiopia. I'd like to share, okay, he deserves it. I would like to share our daughter Samira's story with you. I was traveling back and forth a number of times to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where I was establishing and running a school and an orphanage. Both my husband and I are teachers. I met Samira at the orphanage. She was an outgoing, smart 4-year-old who was gravely ill. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis, TB of the spine, and started treatment there. Sadly, she developed a resistant form of TB, which spread to other parts of her body, including her brain. There was nothing more that could be done for her in Ethiopia. Her only hope was to come to America for further treatment. Samira was one of the lucky ones. We saw the urgency of her condition, we had the ability to adopt her, and we were able to get her to America quickly. With the help of an American doctor friend in Addis, Dr. Rick Hodes, we were able to get the paperwork done and bring her to Seattle Children's Hospital very soon. That's where we met Dr. Kevin Erdahl, who is also a researcher and I hear professor for TB at the center. Samara adored him. Actually, we all adore him. But Samara even named her very first stuffed animal a white teddy bear, Erdal. Dr. Erdal said that was a first. A plan of treatment was developed for Samara, and we slowly began to be hopeful. And in the end, our precious Samara was cured. Yep. Samara is now 13 years old. She's an active middle school student who loves to dance and torment her older brothers. And if Samara had remained in Ethiopia, we all need to remember that she would not be alive today. She is a testament to the need for quality care for all and the importance for further research for developing cures. Unfortunately, for hundreds of thousands of children around the world, they will not receive the same level of care. Because of this, they will die. We really need your help. The area in which someone is born should never be a death sentence. Everyone deserves access to a healthy life. The researchers at the center are developing the science necessary to build healthier lives. The center is promising work that we just heard about on the verge of developing this malaria vaccine. The deciding factor of this happening could very well be whether or not we get the funding. Malaria has touched our lives in many ways through our Ethiopian adoptions. So many lives are lost and children orphaned because of malaria in many countries. I shared earlier about our first Ethiopian adoption, 3 beautiful children that are now grown adults. Tominich is now 28 years old, Amanil 31, and Azrat is 33. They were adopted as young children because their biological mother died of malaria. These 3 were happy in their home in Ethiopia with their families and friends. They would often share amazing stories about their lives before coming to America that would enthrall us all. One story was shared by our oldest son, Azrat, who doesn't know I'm telling this story, by the way. He'd been with us about 6 months when this happened. We were all sitting around the dinner table, we were talking and eating, and I asked the children if anyone had ever seen a lion. Azrat said, "Oh yes, Mommy, I kill lion." I smiled at him and I thought, isn't that cute? He's confused. I asked him to tell me more. And he said, "Oh, Mommy, this very bad lion, he killed my dog, he killed my friend." At this point, I was certainly getting more interested in his story, but I couldn't believe that this little boy who weighed no more than 60 pounds could have killed a lion. He continued to share. "He very bad lion, Mommy, he breaking my house, he going roar." Now, I knew they lived in a round grass hut, and that certainly a lion could break into that. And I also knew that they brought their livestock in to the hut at night. He told us lots of stories about that. So I was wondering. He continued to talk. "Mommy, he coming, he going roar, he coming. I take fire stick from fire, and when lion he go roar, I putting fire stick in lion's mouth. He go running down road, he die." At that point, if you can imagine, everyone at our table was in awe. And we were just looking at him. And finally, one of my 2 biological sons, we were still trying to figure out which one it was sitting at the table, and he looked at his brother and said, "Wow, did you get the hide?" At this point, when Azrat said the next statement, I knew that the story he was sharing was true. He said, after he looked at his brother and he said, "Oh, he's stinking very badly, he burned, he no good." These 3 children would have had a good and loving home in Ethiopia if malaria hadn't taken their mom. I love being mom to these wonderful now adults. They have added so much joy and love to my life. But most children in developing countries that are orphaned don't have the option of finding another family to love and raise them. And all children, if possible, should never have to suffer the loss of a parent. If we work together, we can save lives, help families stay together, and significantly lower the orphan population in many countries by doing further research. Today, my hope is for us to show our support and to give to this research, so together we can build a healthier world. Thank you for giving me this time and for letting me share my stories.
Julie and Samira, thank you so much. I can barely get my laundry done and the grass mowed with 29 kids. I'm just blown away by your love and commitment. Let's have another round of applause. And if your family, entire family, would please stand, we'd love to recognize you. So now I'd like to draw your attention. There are gray envelopes on your tables that are pledge cards. And this is really the time that we'd like you to start considering the amount of money that you'd like to give tonight. You know that it goes to a good cause. And what I want to say just one thing that really struck me when I was hearing from these researchers tonight. The question was, how do you keep going in the face of an insurmountable goal? These researchers get up and they go to work every day knowing that they probably won't find a cure for the disease that day, but they still do it. And they know that the work they do that day will build to a point that these diseases are cured. I think we should embody that mindset tonight and believe that the money that we give tonight is not going to cure the diseases tonight. But guess what? It's taking us a step closer. And when the day comes that we hear of the cure, you can say, that night I gave money that got us to that goal. It's a mindset that I think we need if we're ever going to conquer these things. And I'm so inspired by Madam President, by Mr. Allen, by the researchers tonight, by those of you who are giving money to the cause. That's what it's all about. It's not about immediately solving something. It's about working together to solve it. And you should be proud of yourself for even being here tonight and supporting this cause. And I'm just going to say, if you write a $5,000 check, hold that sign up, you're going to get free bubbly. I thought that would be funnier than it was. Okay. Okay, where was I? Let's see, bad joke, and then the next part after that. There we go. So seriously, though, think about Samira, think about her family, think about her brothers and sisters, think about those kids in Africa who have lost their parents. And that's why we're here. We're here to help. So, I don't know about you, but I've been amazed tonight and inspired. The center has done such incredible work over 4 decades. It's hard to imagine where we would be without the center and its researchers. It's hard to imagine where we would be without Paul Allen in our community. It's hard to imagine where we would be without Madam President and her leadership in Liberia in the face of such an outbreak. So thanks to all of you. And to give you a little more inspiration in adding a few zeros on your check, I'd like to bring back up In Sing Easy to sing one more time. Are they still here? Is this, yeah, they're coming back up. You guys are incredible. Really have set the mood tonight. So come on back up. One more performance. And then we will close out after their performance. One more round of applause. In Sing Easy.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to stand here in front of you and sing. And would like to ask you all to join us, sing this song, and celebrate life. I'm sure that you know the song that we're going to sing. And if you know the song, please sing along. If you don't know the song, please sing louder. It goes like this.
Imbuwe mama, imbuwe mama, imbuwe mama, aiwo imbuwe mama, imbuwe, 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 imbuwe mama, imbuwe, imbuwe mama, imbuwe, imbuwe mama, imbuwe, imbuwe mama, imbuwe, aunansi imbuwe mama, aunansi imbuwe mama, aunansi imbuwe, aunansi imbuwe, wemawe, 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 siekli, wemawe. It's a bit chaotic now. Wemawe, 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 wemawe. So ladies, wemawe, get ready to sing high. Wemawe, 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 wemawe. Ladies, wemawe. Wemawe, we go high, and men will sing bass. Wemawe, 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 wemawe. Wow, it sounds so beautiful, ladies. Wemawe, 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 wemawe. In the jungle, in the jungle. Wemawe, wemawe, wemawe. Ladies, wemawe, wemawe. Wemawe, wemawe, aha, so wemawe, 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 wemawe. And the guys who sing the bass will mix it together. Wemawe, 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 wemawe. Solo, 1, 2, solo, go. The jungle. Wemawe, 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 wemawe. And now, wemawe, mbuwe, imbuwe, 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 mbuwe, imbuwe, 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 mbuwe, imbuwe, 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 imbuwe,
Nice job, you guys. Okay, we just had some great news. These guys do have CDs available online in Sing Easy. Search them out. I wish we could just have you guys sing for the rest of the night. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. So I hope tonight was rewarding for all of you. I want to thank you so much for being here on behalf of the center, those of you who gave your time to be here tonight. We've all come together tonight to make a reason, and that is to save lives. So the donation envelopes, if you could just make sure they get into the larger envelope on the table, that will get it to the right spot. Thank you so much once again for coming tonight. You're welcome to stay. That's the good news. The bars in the foyer will remain open. And those of you, yes, that got a bit of a reaction. Those of you who have had an exceptionally good time, there are taxis available outside. So I just want to say it's been my honor and pleasure to be here as your MC tonight. I'll see you Monday morning at 4:30 on King 5. Good night.